Thursday. Thought it was Thursday. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Bhad Paramahansa Purujikacharya Ashtotar to Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Purujikacharya Ashtotar to Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktabinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Now, I think we read text 7, but I wanted to do it again because we didn't get a chance to really expound on it. Does anyone remember that?
Yes, Prabhu. I think you said the same.
Okay, Tapas. That's why you gave the title for this one. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 27th day of September 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in a chapter 15 entitled The Yoga of the Supreme Person, text number 7 on page 599. Okay. Mamaya Vangsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhutaha Sanatanaha Manach Shashtanindriyani Prakatistani Karshati Mamaya Vangsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha Manakshastani Indriyani Prakatistani Karshati Mamaya Vangsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhutak Sanatanaha manakshastan indriyani pakatistani karshati mamaya vangsho jiva loke jiva bhutak sanatanaha manakshastan indriyani pakatistani karshati. Go down, you're on. Mamaya vangsho jiva loke jiva bhutak sanatanaha manakshastan indriyani pakatistani karshati. Ishtadev. Mamaya vangsho jiva loke jiva bhutak sanatanaha manakshastan indriyani pakatistani karshati. Ravi. Mamaya vangsho jiva loke jiva bhutak sanatanaha manakshastan indriyani pakatistani karshati. Dimitri. Mamaya vangsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manakshastan indriyani pakatistani karshati. Do you want to try it, Manasi? Mamaya vangsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manakshastan indriyani pakatistani karshati. Jessica.
Prabhu, I'm here.
Not today. Okay, Vijay, you're on. No, Vijay.
Yes. Mamaya vangsho jiva loke
Mamaya vangsho jiva loke
jiva bhuta sanatanaha
jiva bhuta sanatanaha
manasashtanindriyani
manakshastan indriyani
prakritistani karshati.
pakatistani karshati. Okay, word by words. Mama, go ahead. Mama. Oh, I'm sorry. You all got books, so I'll just read through. Mama, my, eva, certainly, angshaha, fragmental particle, jiva loke, in the world of conditioned life, jiva bhutaha, the conditioned living entity, sanatanaha, eternal, manaha, with the mind, shastani, the 6 indriyani, senses, prakati, in material nature, stani, situated, karshati, is struggling hard. Translation. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Purport. In this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life and then his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatanaha. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva, and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion, and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms like Lord Ram, Nrsingadev, Vishnu Murti, and all the predominating deities in the Vaikuntha planets. The separated expansions, the living entities, are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead, are always present. Similarly, the separated expansions of living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of His qualities, of which independence is one. Every living entity, as an individual soul, has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from this material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditioned life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. The living entities, not only human beings and the cats and dogs, but even the greater controllers of the material world, Brahma, Lord Shiva, and even Vishnu, are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word karshati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this verse, that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body with the mind and the senses. And when he is liberated, this material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the Madhyandinayana Shruti. Sabai esha brahmanishta idam shariram martyam atisrijya brahma visampadya brahmana pashiti brahmana shrunoti brahmanaya vedam sarvam anubhavati. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body. And in his spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Smriti also it is understood, Vasanti yatra purusha sarve vaikuntamurtayaha. In the spiritual planets, everyone lives in bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godheads. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of Vishnumurti. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Mamai Vangshaha, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word sanatan, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. Dehi nosmin yata dehe. That fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcels of gold are also gold. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this is again a very oft-quoted verse. Srila Prabhupada would often quote this verse, and he would often quote it for the very first line that he mentions here. this word sanatana, that because there's an ongoing battle. You have to understand, Prabhupada in India, he was right in the middle of it, between the personalists and the impersonalists, those who conceive the Absolute to be the Brahman, the impersonal Brahman. The famous Nirvishesha, in the Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarani, Prabhupada is delivering those who are receptive to his message from this misconception of Nirvishesh and Shunyavadi. Nirvishesh literally means no varieties, no details. We learn in the second chapter, first canto, that the absolute truth is understood by those who are seers of the truth to be manifest in three basic states or forms. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti, Shabdite. So Brahman is compared like if you look at the sun. Well, you don't look at the sun, but the sun rises. And from just the light that you see in the sky, you understand the sun is in the sky. That all-pervading light is like Brahman. Brahman, we call it the Brahman effulgence, the Brahma Jyoti. Jyoti literally means effulgence. So that light is purely spiritual. In some places, Prabhupada explained that it's composed of living entities who are in this state without any physical bodies. They're in a liberated state there. But they're not engaging in their original constitutional position, which Prabhupada mentions at least 3 or 4 times in this purport, of having a spiritual body in which they can engage in loving relations and loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's compared to the sunshine. Then if you search out the sun in the sky, say in the morning, it's coming up over there at the eastern horizon, and you see, oh, there's one place in the sky where the sun is located, right? That's called localized. It happens to be over there, then we know it travels all over the sky during each day. So that's compared to the super soul. So that's the Paramatma, the superior or supreme Atma, or self. Now that is, just as there are many stars in the sky or many universes with suns in them, there are uncountable manifestations of this Paramatma. And all of those Paramatmas are actually one. They're all expansions of Krishna. So each of us has within our heart a manifestation of Krishna as Paramatma. And in this chapter, there's a very important verse explaining what he does there. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto mattak smatir jnanam apohanangsha. Another oft-quoted verse. So he says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sann, in every heart of every living entity, not just human beings, but wherever you see an organism, a living being, the trees, the plants, the insects, the fish, everything that moves and has consciousness, that's a living organism. And there's a super soul in there. Giving what? Matta, from me, come knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Now that forgetfulness we're very familiar with, and we're also familiar with the other two. But the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita is that we don't die. We're not born and we never die. The body is born and the body dies, but we're not the body. So that means we've had bodies in the previous, we've had different incarnations. We also have incarnations. And then we'll have future incarnations. Now, if we're fortunate, we'll have only one. It'll be in our spiritual body and we'll be back to Godhead. But each one of those, can anyone here remember them? No. But they happen. And as we'll learn in the next couple of verses, the subtle body, we each have 2 bodies, 2 material bodies. We have the gross body, which we call the body. But there's also the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. That's called the subtle body. That doesn't perish when the gross body dies. It's that subtle body that we're creating or building with everything we do in this lifetime. And that will serve as the template for the next body. When we finally leave this body, the next body is already ready. Because don't forget, the super soul is everywhere. He's seeing, he's completely conscious and super conscious. So he knows, oh, I see, this person did this, they created such karma, they want to, now this body is waiting for them. Now some very good news here, we learn in the second chapter. If you practice even a little bit of devotional service, like attending even one Bhagavad Gita class, hearing Prabhupada's purports here in the not hearing me, but that's some devotional service, then you sure have a human life. Because nothing is ever lost of any devotional service that you do. And this is devotional service, hearing Krishna's words and Krishna's pure devotees' words. So that means that you need another body, a human body in the next life to read. Who knows, you may pass out of your body tonight. You have to read chapter 8, text 8 of this chapter. You have to come back. That's part of what you want to do. And Krishna says, okay, this person. So that's very fortunate. But that's just the minimal. We want to complete the course in this lifetime. This is actually the mission of human life, is to finally end this tiresome transmigration through all different, even through different human bodies. Because every time you attain, you're embodied in a material form, then that material form will come to an end, no doubt about it. It's called death. Very painful, because we're so accustomed to this, all these relationships, and nobody wants to die. Why? Because we are intrinsically eternal. Our nature is Sat Chit Ananda. That's who we are. Eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. But in our present form, are we, any of us, that? We're certainly not eternal. We have some knowledge of some things, but there's a whole bunch of things we don't know. We're not full of knowledge. And where's the bliss? We're looking for it, and we get some happiness, flickering happiness, but it comes and it goes. And then eventually you get to be my age and you can't enjoy anything anymore, material. But you can always chant Hare Krishna. The spiritual happiness is always there. As long as you have consciousness and you can think of Krishna, then the soul can enjoy on that level. The body may be in whatever state it may be. But you can see, if you're placing your faith in the material senses and your hopes and aspirations in being able to enjoy, then that's bound to be frustrated, and all kinds of anxieties and fears develop, because you're bound to lose that. So the whole mission here, this is a very important understanding, because we are minute portions, just like a sun ray. What is the sun ray? Okay, the sun comes up, and then there's all these countless rays, but we know that they're individual rays, photons, whatever you call them. They have a minute portion of heat and light, right? And all of that countless billions and trillions of rays, that's what we call the sunshine. So if we said there's the super soul, there's the sun. Now, if you're actually able to go to the sun in a yogi's body or whatever, somehow, then you'll find the presiding deity there. It's not that because it's so fiery, there's no living entities there. There's living entities in the water. They've found bacteria and all kinds of even in the earth and in the air. Why not in the fire? I remember it was, 20, 30 years ago. A little north of here, maybe you know more than I do, Ishta Dave, there's some really deep trenches, right in the ocean. Marianas Trench goes down, 15,000, 20,000 feet. It's amazing. So you can imagine the pressure down there, tremendous, water pressure. So there's vents. They're like underwater volcanoes and everything, and so there's some huge, very hot that are coming out there. They've explored it with machines and things like that. And so they captured some of that water that's coming out of that's around that vents, and they found there's some kind of bacteria in there. You remember that? That was a discovery. Who could imagine? I mean, I used to work in a hospital, and we put all kinds of stuff in the autoclave to sterilize it, right? Heat, it destroys all the bacteria. No, it turns out that there's super temperature there, and the bacteria can live there. So the point is that why not on the sun? Our bodies are mostly earth and water, more water, but high size and worth. But there's also some air there. There's fire and belly. If you don't have the digestive fire, you can't digest, right? And there's certainly mind, intelligence. We're combinations of these elements that we learned about in chapter 7. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, each more subtle. So like Lord Brahma, his body is mostly intelligence. Why not? And because it's so subtle, he lives for over 300 trillion years, but not forever. He still has to leave his body eventually. So the Brahma is mostly always a living entity like us. But you can see the varieties that there can be in combinations of these material energies. But whenever we have a material body, we're limited, because our real nature is spiritual. That's why this word angsha is so important. Angsha means a part and parcel. Prabhupada's famous part and parcel. We have Krishna's qualities in a minute degree. And one of them is independence. He deals with this eternal question everyone has. Well, if we were so blissful up there, why did we leave? That doesn't make any sense. You know, what is it that it would induce us to leave? It's a good question, and it came up several times. Prabhupada answered at least a half a dozen letters about that. So the idea is that we have Krishna's qualities in minute degree, and one of them is independence. There has to be that independence, otherwise there's no meaning to loving exchange. You have to remember, bhakti really means exchange of love, loving service, and also reciprocation from Krishna. So love has to be freely given, otherwise it's not love. It's something else. So Krishna takes a risk, and he expands himself in its countless, what we call vibhinangsha. Vibhinangsha, angsha, there's the word angsha, separated. We're separated parts and parcel of Krishna. He also mentioned, didn't use the word in his purport, svangsha. Svangsha means plenary. Plenary means full. All these Vishnu forms that we read about, some of the famous ones I mentioned, Lord Nrsingadev, Ramchandra, right? Very famous avatars. They're non-different from Krishna. They have the same powers that Krishna has, but they don't display them all. Krishna has unlimited strength, wealth, beauty, knowledge, fame, and detachment, dispassion, or we call it renunciation. He has them to the ultimate degree, and he actually shows them. So Lord Ramchandra has those to a high degree, but he doesn't display them to the ultimate degree that Krishna does. The Nrsingadev, you don't usually, God forbid I should make an offense, but you don't usually think of Nrsingadev in the context of, you know, all-encompassing beauty. Strength? Yes. But the beauty is, you know, I mean, of course, when he's pacified and Prahlad is there, there's a great beauty to the Nrsingadev. But he's not manifesting like Krishna's beauty, all right, to the nth degree. He has it, but it's not being manifest. So, but still, his sva angsha, he's a plenary expansion. We are partial expansions, but we still have the qualities to a minute degree. So we are not manifesting those divine qualities now. In touch with Krishna's internal energy, which we enter as soon as we chant that name. See, this is the great blessing in this age. That what is that famous verse? This is a verse that you could learn also. You may know it already. Harir Nama, Harir Nama, Harir Nama eva kevalam, kalau nastyeva, nastyeva, nastyeva gatadanyata. There's only about 4 words in that verse. So what it means is, I put it into a little poem. If you want to achieve the supreme goal of life in this age, when dissension and chaos abound, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way that can ever be found but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name with a stout-hearted vow. And to pray, O Lord Krishna, O friend of the poor, let my head ever unto your lotus feet bow. That's the humility you have to chant. But if you chant one way or another, you're in touch with Krishna's internal energy. And that means the purification is starting to happen, and the attraction of Krishna is starting to happen. The very name Krishna means all attractive. I learned this verse recently. I knew about it. I never memorized it. Maybe I don't have it fully now. Krishna bhu vachaka kshabdo nashta nirvati vachaka tayor aikyum param brahma Krishna ityabhidiyate. I did remember it. So he analyzes the name Krishna into 2 syllables. Sanskrit is such a potent and perfect language that everything means something. You know, there's no wasted syllables here. So the word krish, it means to draw, it means to attract. The word karshati is used at the end of this verse. That's a verb form of it. But the noun krish encompasses all the attractive features of Krishna, all attractive. The syllable na, the bliss, the unlimited ananda is there in that one syllable. And so you put them together, tayor aikyum, you put those 2 into one, and you get Krishna ityabhidiyate, the Supreme Brahman. Inconceivable. You can't guess at it. It has to be this knowledge has to be given. But if you try it, as we've all done to one degree or here, then you experience some of that all attractiveness and at least a taste of the bliss. which starts to cure us of our addiction to the material so-called pleasures, which keep us bound here. The sense gratification is simply a perverted reflection of the pleasures we enjoy in serving Krishna. This is a central part of our philosophy. So this verse is important for understanding that. First of all, we're Sanatan. We're never going to be God. And it's a good thing. We can't be God. It means our natural state, our swarup. This word swarup is important. Swa means one's own. Rupa means form. Our actual form. This is not anyone's sarup. How could it be a sarup? It's always changing. Sarup means your eternal form. Your eternal form in relation to Krishna, by which you engage in a certain kind of relationship, either as a servant, as a friend, as a parent, as a conjugal lover, all kinds of relationships we have in this world, but which are temporary and frustrating. I remember my mother, she lived to be 96, and I would visit her. I joined in 1973, and she passed away in 2006, so there was quite a time there, 33 years. And I would visit her periodically. And even in her old age, when she got into her 80s, I would see her. And she would come and she wanted to feed me. There wasn't much she could feed me that I could eat, some potatoes and this. I said, okay, this is what I want to have, and I would offer it, And, but she was still had that parental, maternal relationship. If I was being fed, and I'm happy, the mother is generally happy with those two things. If you're healthy and happy, they're fine. The father wants to know, what did you do? I wanted you to take over the business. Like my father, he never got over it. He said, he's lying in his bed, he's about to pass away, and he said, when are you getting out of that thing? When are you getting out of it? It was already it was like 14 years later, just coming to Dodi. But he was a good guy too. He really helped me. But the mother has a different relationship. She's always just the health and welfare of the child. So that is a rasa with Krishna. We sing Yashoda Nandana, right? Brajajana Ranjana. This song is great, by the way. Each of the elements describes a different relationship. Jaya Radha Madhava. It starts out with the highest relationship of Radharani, the eternal conjugal relationship. The perfection, Madhurya, very sweet. Kunja Bihari. Kunja Bihari means Krishna who enjoys in the groves and gardens of Vrindavan. That also describes conjugal, but it also can be enjoying with the cowherd boys, Yashoda Nandana. That's the third line. Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha. Now that means that all of the gopis love him. He's very dear, Vallabha, to all of the gopis. And they have subtle varieties of their relationship with him, but it's all within this Madhurya Ras. Giri Varadhari. Now this whole temple is named after Giridhari, right? Dhari means one who holds up, who lifts. And Vara, not Vana, Vara means the best of hills, Govardhan. Giri, Vara, Dhari. So this recalls his pastime, where he reciprocated with all the relatives, all the residents of Vrindavan. They were all being attacked by Indra. Indra, he tends to go mad. He felt offended because they stopped the yajna to him. And he decided to destroy the whole Vrindavan community. He forgot who Krishna was, And so there's this huge downpour, not just of rain. I mean, they just had a huge flood in New York City. I lived there for years. We had nothing like that. They saw the pictures of the subway stations getting inundated like a waterfall. Yeah, flooded. So you imagine that happening in a little village, torrents of rain, big blocks of ice, lightning, thunder, wind. So all the residents and the cows, as included, they were so frightened. So what do? This is they call out to Krishna. They don't try to figure out how are we going to build it. Maybe we should run to a cave, get out of here. No, they call to Krishna. This is their qualification. So he performed this miracle. He was doing many things at once. This is one of the qualities of Krishna, his genius. That he can do a bunch of things at one time. So he wanted to destroy Indra's pride. Indra's a devotee, but he tends to fly off the handle periodically. So he needed to be curbed and to be taught a lesson, So he wanted he wanted to save his friends and the cows and everybody and protect them. So there's a big hill there. When you go there, you'll see it's kind of shorter than it was in Krishna's day. It's kind of sinking, but it's substantial. So he lifted the whole hill up with one pinky. And he stood there. He's only, 7 or 8 years old? 7 years old, I think. And so his mother was afraid it was gonna, why? She was telling the cow woman, "Why don't you help him?" So you'll find that in many of the illustrations, you see they're holding it up with their sticks, posing. Is it there? Yeah, you'll see. They got their sticks. This whole temple is, some of them have sticks, so they're trying to hold it up. So that, they're not really doing anything, but the bottom panel there. Yeah, there's 1 or 2 sticks. So he's holding the hill up for 7 days and nights. He's not eating, sleeping, neither are they. And during that time, unlike other times, you have to remember he goes out during the day, and the younger gopis or the elder gopis, they can't see him at that time. The cowherd men are out there herding their cows, he's herding the calves or whatever, So he's out there, and then he comes back. Oh, it's such a festival, a return, Then he goes home, and they can't see him again. So it's like meeting, separation. But here, 7 days straight, 24 hours a day, they all got to relish Krishna's beautiful form and to, appreciate his relationship, and it was wonderful. So and at the same time, he's curbing Indra's pride. Here's how important you are. You're so powerful, sending all these blocks of ice and everything, and rain and wind and lightning. Well, now I'm just defeating you with my little pinky, you see? So afterward, then he 7 days and nights. So Indra said, "Oh boy, I really made a mistake." So he called off the clouds, and the sun came out. And Krishna said, "Okay, you can go out now. The rain has stopped." And so they all gradually go out. And then when everyone is out, he puts it back right where it was before. And everyone is just, that's what this temple is all about. So he's Giri Varadhari, Yashoda Nandana. That's a maternal ras, with so many details. Especially now is the season. We're coming up on the Kartik season. Every morning we're going to sing Damodarashtaka. Namam Visharam Satchit Anandarupam. It's all about this Damodar Leela where Krishna steals the butter and he gets tied up. And very delightful. Every morning you sing it and meditate. It never gets old. So that's where we belong. And Krishna has all of these relationships, and we've forgotten that. We've turned our back on that, and we're trying to find that loving pleasure in this material world, and it's not to be had. We can have a reflection of it for some time, but then it fades. The person dies or goes away, or we die, or whatever, just to change, the force of change. This is called Bhava Sagara. Who can explain what those 2 words mean? Who knows? Okay, and Bhava. Bhava actually means change. Bhava means emotion. Yeah, the long and short A's make a big difference. Bhava means change, constant change, the ocean of change. The basic change is birth. That's a big change. And then old age. Believe me, it's a big change, right, Ishadi? Death, radical change, and birth. That's Bhava Sagara, the ocean of birth, old age, disease, and death. Birth, old age, disease, and death. We've been going for who knows how many millions of years. And we always forget the last one. And we think, oh, this is life. This is all there is. What's the most amazing thing? According to Yudhishthira, he was asked by his father. He was asked by Yamaraj. There's this whole pastime in the Mahabharata where they're out in the forest. The 5 Pandavas and Mother Kunti is there. They've been exiled for how many years? 14 years or something like that. They escaped from the House of Black, and it was a whole story. And but they're out in the forest. It's hard to live there, so they're very thirsty. So Yudhishthira, he's the eldest and he's in charge. So he sends, is it Arjun first? I forget who goes first, but he's got Arjun, Bhima, and the 2 twins. Sahadev and Nakula. And so one after another he sends them. I think Arjun's first. And he finds a nice pond where there's fresh water that they can drink. So he has some kind of container, but first he wants to drink. But there's a disembodied voice. It happens to be Yamaraj. He doesn't know that. And it says, "You cannot drink there. That pond belongs to me unless you answer my questions." Arjun is a big kshatriya, he says, "Who is this?" So he drinks and he immediately falls unconscious. So he doesn't come back. Yudhishthira then sends Bhima. So Bhima is even less, willing to take any orders from this disembodied. So boom, he falls down unconscious. Sends the twins, falls down unconscious. So finally Yudhishthira is there, his mother's there. And he said, "I'm going to find the others." So he goes and he sees his brothers. And but he's super thirsty. But he doesn't drink because he's Dharma Raj. He's persona. He never told me to lie. He wouldn't, okay, this belongs to whoever with the voice. What's the question? So there's a whole series of them, all of which are very interesting. But the one that is quoted most often is, "What's the most amazing thing in this world?" And so he answers with this verse: "Ahanyahani bhutani gachanti hi amaliyam sheshaksthavanamichanti kimaschayam atak param." Says day after day, millions and millions of human souls in human bodies are dying and being dragged off to Yama's abode for judgment. But those who are left, they're living as if they're going to live forever. You're not realizing realizing the implication of death. Otherwise, why would you spend so much time trying to build up things in this world, accumulating money, relationships, honors, all these different things? It's all coming to an end. What's the point? We're actually living as if we're going to live forever. Even though, when you get to be our age, so many people who died, some younger than you, not to speak of those older than you. I remember the first time I was a kid when my grandmother died. Nobody in my circle had ever died. And I said, "Oh, Grandma?" Because we used to visit her. I knew her quite well, No more, That whole idea that people can die was something new. Shocking. I was kind of thrown for a while. I had to lie down on the sofa for half an hour. But, then I just took up my life. But Krishna consciousness means, and the first instructions are all about death and life. Dehi nosmin yata dehi komaram yovanang jana. It's like the first instruction, near the first instruction. Prabhupada refers to it here. Very illuminating, because it's not just death that's significant, it's the rebirth as well. It's the idea that, yes, everything having to do with this particular body is temporary. Obviously, we know that. But we don't live the life with taking that into consideration. What's the implications? Okay, death is one thing, but to understand that we as souls never die, and we're going to have another destination, and that we can, under proper guidance, do things and go and engage in all our senses and mind in such a way that we'll get a much better birth, or even stop being born altogether. That will escape from this bhavasagara. It's sometimes compared to an ocean, sometimes compared to a forest fire. As we know every morning, samsara dhava nalalina loka tranaya. Very important line. Samsara is the same as bhava, means the pains of birth, old age, disease, and death. Dhava is forest fire. All these fires up north, right? And some people, they come, their houses are in danger, they have to leave, they lose everything, or even they get killed. This world is like a forest fire or like an ocean. Both are places of great danger. So is it Lita Loka? All the people are suffering in this forest fire of birth and death, old age, disease, and death. And the spiritual master who comes to give this knowledge that we're reading here, and the means by which we can realize the knowledge, he's delivering Tranaya, us from this forest fire. So the first emotion we should experience during the day, with those of us who go to Mangalartik, and you're all invited, is gratitude. So fortunate that Srila Prabhupada took the trouble to come, and I wanted to mention that today is the anniversary of the day when he arrived in America in September of 1965, 56 years ago. And the whole trip, it was amazing. You know, here was a Hare Krishna. He was 69. He actually turned 69 on the boat. And he was elderly. His health wasn't that great. He had 2 heart attacks on the trip. He wasn't in on a cruise boat. He wasn't on an ocean liner. He was on a little what do they call, cargo ship with a little compartment. He had free passage. But he had an order from his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, to preach in English language, preach to the Westerners. And so he had tried in India to preach in English. He had a magazine, BTG, and so many things. And but it wasn't working. And he realized he's going to have to, even at that age, he's just have to try to go to America and see what he can do. And it's just like, Krishna, I'm jumping off this cliff. Please save me. I know you want me to do something at the bottom, but I don't know how I'm going to. It was completely at his hands. It was very unlikely that he would succeed from any material point of view. So he courageously did it for our benefit, so that we could be saved. And he had a plan. He would do it in America and then bring it back to India. And amazingly, it worked. And so that's why we're sitting here. And he wrote these books, and to get them produced and distributed. It was an amazing effort. So what did he want to give us? He wanted to give us the knowledge of who we actually are, what our mission in life is, and how we can really be happy forever. It sounds like a fairy tale, but that's actually what the mission is. And it has been achieved before. Our whole sampradaya, our spiritual community, is filled with realized souls who have achieved this goal, even in this life, a life of equal poise and happiness, because you're on a spiritual platform. Yes, you have to tolerate the whips of material energy. The body is, fallible. But knowing that it's your last birth, that you're already established in your relationship with God, and that you're going back home, back to Godhead, that you can imagine how peaceful it would be. I mean, I've been at the bedside of devotees who've passed away. They asked me sometimes to sing Ojasvi, you remember, and others, Padmavati. And Padmavati, he had quite a story. I'll just tell this real quick. It's been over 10 years now. She passed in 2011. She called me up. I got to go to the hospital. She had COPD. Those who know, that's a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Anyway, she felt it was a Kadashi, and in January of 2011, and she said, "I'm going to the hospital. I want you to come. This could be it." So I went there with Rajendra Nandana Prabhu. And we went, and she was in the hospital. She was on a breathing machine, and her children, she had 2 sons and a daughter, I believe, who had flown in from different parts of the country, All right, so what do? You chant Hare Krishna at that time. That's the whole idea. So we started chanting. And you know who came by? Those that you remember, Bhagavad Gita came with Ladali. Bhagavad Gita herself was in her 90s at that time. So they stayed for a little while, but then Bhagavad Gita had her own health issues, and so she left. They left us singing. And then the daughter came in, I think it's one of the sons, and said, "Well, okay, it's time to let her go." And so, well, we should keep singing, I said, no, we want to do the family thing, So what are we going to say? So we went to a little room, maybe 30 steps away, and sat down, waiting room. We were there maybe 15 minutes when one of the sons came in and said, "You better come back. She's hanging in." We pulled all the plugs, the breathing machine, and she's still still hanging in there. She doesn't want to go. So they thought, well, maybe if we're there chanting, she'll go. So we went back and chanted for 5 minutes, and she left very peacefully. She knew. And there's some other stories like that. But that's a blessing. It's worth more than $12 billion. You know, what are you going to do with $12 billion? You're leaving your body. But the remembrance of Krishna is everything. That's the whole idea. You remember back in the 8th chapter? It says, Antakale chamame. Antakale means the end time. We're all headed for the end time, this body. Antakale chamame vas smaran mukva kalevim yapriyati samadbhavam yastinatyata sankshaya. He says, those who at that time, Antakale mame smaran mukva, remember me, kalevaram, as they give up the body, yakpriyati samadbhavam, as they leave, they attain my nature, they come to the spiritual world. In other words, they rejoin me. Yati, there's no doubt about this. The Sankshaya. That's it. In the beginning of the 2nd chapter, which is kind of a beginning, again, a restarting of the Bhagavatam. If you read the 2nd canto, it begins with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, which is the indication. And so Shukadev has a few instructions, then he ends with Etavag Sankhya Yoga Abhyam Swadharma Padinishtiya Janmalabhak Purang Pungsam Ante Narayana Smriti. Ante Narayana Smriti, remembering Narayan. Whatever you do in terms of your duties in Swadharma, you know, your activities, or practicing Sankhya Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga, whatever you're doing, the success of it, of your life, of the birth, will be if you remember Narayan at the end of life. Narayan's another name for Krishna. So if you're surrounded by loving devotees helping you to remember, as so many things are going on in your body and mind, but you're hearing the holy name, what a boon that is. You see. So anyway, this is there's a lot to understand here. But Krishna is going to have a very, very illuminating description here of the transmigration, how transmigration takes place in the next couple of verses. Just as I was describing the state of the mind, he compares it to the wind going over either a garden or a garbage dump, you know, depending, then it'll take you to another. All right, we have 2 or 3 minutes. Any local questions? Ravi has a question or a comment. Can we get the mic over here? We should really deploy both mics. We're having a...
Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, so Prabhuji, when this Yudhishthir answered this question, right? So how in our lives we can, like, I think most population also just forgets this reality of life and death, right? So how do we inculcate that? I mean, how do...
Inculcate means we tell somebody else or we get it ourselves. Yeah, how do we... we read the books. It's everywhere, and we have to. The main thing of what is it that distracts us from this reality, and it's absorption in material things. In other words, when we get too absorbed, which everyone is, you know, in the conditioned state, in the temporary comings and goings of this world, what your aspirations are, this relation, that relation, what's going on. In other words, you fill your mind with temporary things, and you get involved in that, then that produces the forgetfulness. It's said that we should live in such a way that we think we may die at any moment. Oh, I got to chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. We're supposed to chant at all times. The goal of the yogis sitting in meditation is to come to the point of constantly remembering Brahman or the Paramatma or whatever, right? It's constant remembrance. So they detach themselves from the hurly-burly of this world, go off to the Himalayas or somewhere, you know, so whatever. But really, it's impossible to get to that state, and it's not practical for hardly anyone. But how, even in the middle of a big city like San Diego or something, or modern world, can we attain that state of constant remembrance? You have to learn how to see Krishna in all the things that are going on. That's the beginning of Bhagavatam, second canto again, the whole universal form. Don't just see the sun, you see, oh, this is the eye of Krishna. Don't just see a river, oh, this is the veins of the universal form, see? So you begin to see the world as the external body of God. In other words, you're still reminded that this divinity everywhere. But more important for us is to practice the art and science of using everything that's here in Krishna's service, connecting it with Krishna. That's the whole idea. And that's why, what's the whole idea of deity worship? Well, there's stone in the form of Krishna, but it's been sanctified, and by the worship and the installation and everything, it's actually Krishna's manifesting through that stone. So you're able to even come here with your ordinary eyes, that you can see only material objects, and you can see God. If you are in the right mentality, you don't see stone. You see actually Giridhari, Radha Giridhari, right? We didn't worship, in Radhashtami, the stone statue of Radharani. We worship in Radharani, right? So the idea is that you can also come to the point of seeing everything in this world as Krishna's energy. He's teaching that in the 7th chapter. Earth, water, fire, ether. But it really works when you're in the mentality of engaging whatever you can in the service of the Lord. Then Krishna gives you that remembrance. It's all a gift of Krishna. And so you can come to the point of feeling the presence of God in everything. And then you can feel your eternal nature. You're conscious. And then you come to the point where, death is not that frightening, because you know that you're not going to die. You're just going to change stations. You're just going to take off, like Krishna said, take off a coat and put on another coat. But this other coat is your eternal body, the spiritual body. So what we're doing in Krishna consciousness is exactly the idea of being able to remember that at every time. The main thing is that we can remember Krishna, and then Krishna will give us the understanding, yes, that it's urgent that you remember me at every time, because life is very, very fragile, like a drop of water on a lotus. Okay, it's time to quit. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. So, you're all invited tomorrow for text 8.